I agreed to an open marriage after discovering that my wife had been unfaithful, allowing her the freedom to see other men for a decade. However, things took a complicated turn when I developed genuine feelings for my coworker. I'm a 47-year-old man married to Lisa, a 42-year-old woman, and we've been together for 17 years. Despite being married for that long, we only truly lived as a couple for about 7 years. About 10 years ago, I discovered Lisa was cheating on me. She admitted that she had fallen out of love and desired an open marriage. At the time, we had 2 children. Our older child was just a toddler, and the younger was still an infant. This revelation was absolutely heartbreaking for me. Lisa explained that having back-to-back pregnancies had severely impacted her physical and mental health, leading her to seek a way to rejuvenate her life. Unfortunately, her way of finding solace was by bringing different men into our bed. Divorcing was a complicated matter, especially with 2 very young children and my limited income. I decided to allow her the freedom she sought while I moved to the upstairs unit of our duplex house. We transitioned into co-parenting our children, but the separation was far from smooth. There was a lot of resentment and name-calling, primarily on my part due to her infidelity. Over time, however, we both got caught up in our respective lives and work, and I began to move on and find a sense of peace. A few months ago, I met Kathy, a 35-year-old woman who works with me. She's younger and was a junior at our workplace. We instantly connected and bonded naturally, initially without any romantic intentions. Our relationship started as understanding co-workers who occasionally spent time together outside of work, maintaining a platonic friendship. It wasn't until last month that we shared a kiss, and I realized there was something special between us. Since then, Kathy has been staying over at my place more frequently, which started to raise concerns. Technically, Lisa is still my wife as we haven't finalized the divorce. Recently, Lisa has been acting strangely. By strange, I mean she has been lingering around whenever Kathy and I are together, asserting herself with the authority of a wife. I had to remind her that we were separated and that I was free to make my own choices, just as she had for years. Her behavior is difficult to articulate, but I'll attempt to describe it. One particular evening, Kathy and I were enjoying dinner in my kitchen when Lisa unexpectedly appeared and asked if she could join us. The situation became incredibly awkward for both Kathy and me. We exchanged bewildered glances as Lisa sat down at the table without waiting for our response, continuing to eat as if nothing was amiss. We ended up having dinner like strangers, with forced smiles and a lack of genuine interest in Lisa's presence. The meal was thoroughly ruined, but I chose to give Lisa the benefit of the doubt, assuming she was simply trying to fit back into our lives. Another incident occurred when Lisa acted bossy, attempting to assert her rights as a wife while Kathy and I were upstairs watching a movie. Lisa barged into the room and demanded that I come downstairs. When I inquired about the issue, she claimed that our younger child had a science project that needed my assistance. This was surprising because we had previously agreed to split our children's schoolwork, with me helping the older child and her handling the younger one. I explained that I had already fulfilled my responsibilities for our older son, leaving the younger son's project as her responsibility. This infuriated Lisa, who accused me of neglecting our child and insinuated that I was merely lurking around instead of being supportive. This confrontation escalated into a full-blown argument between us, leaving Kathy feeling uncomfortable and deciding to leave our home after that incident. Following this altercation, Kathy informed me that she would no longer be staying at my place, opting instead to meet at her own home. I found myself in a dilemma. Why should I compromise my newfound happiness when I had never interfered with Lisa's life, despite her bringing various men into our home? I had chosen to overlook her actions, but now that I had found someone I genuinely connected with, Lisa was deliberately trying to sabotage our relationship. I confronted her the next day, expressing my concern that she wasn't respecting my relationship with Kathy. Lisa denied being bothered by our closeness and refused to acknowledge her disruptive behavior. She dismissed my feelings as overthinking and continued to intrude into my personal space. I told her that if she persisted, I would seriously consider divorcing her. Tears welled up in her eyes, as she claimed she never intended to disturb us, explaining that she was anxious about our son's unfinished project and preoccupied with her own work, which was why she asked for my help. I countered that her actions were not genuine cries for help but rather manipulative behavior. In an attempt to make amends, she called Kathy to apologize and invited her to come over. Kathy accepted the apology but established her boundaries, preferring to meet at her own place. Now, I'm at a crossroads, feeling stuck and contemplating ending my marriage to prevent Lisa from destroying my blossoming relationship with Kathy. I'm seriously considering filing for divorce. The only reason I hadn't pursued divorce earlier was my desire to spare our children from choosing between their parents. Now, I'm grappling with whether to prioritize my own happiness over my children's immediate needs or to wait until they are older and more independent before making a move. I'm uncertain if Kathy will remain patient with me until then. Additionally, I'm still harboring anger towards Lisa for her decision to open our marriage, and towards myself for agreeing to it without pushing back harder. I apologize for the lengthy and somewhat disorganized account, especially regarding the details of Lisa's infidelity and the dynamics of our separation. Many have commented that it's challenging to offer advice without a clear understanding of the situation, so here's the full story. You can skip this part if you're not interested in the background, but please note that this all occurred about 10 years ago, so I might be missing some finer details. For months after our younger son's birth, Lisa began to act out. She distanced herself emotionally and physically, expressing that she wasn't ready for intimacy due to pregnancy and breastfeeding, which had made her averse to physical closeness. I respected her wishes, but noticed she was growing apart from me emotionally. I suggested we seek couples therapy, but she dismissed the idea, attributing her behavior to postpartum issues that would eventually resolve. After nearly a year of growing impatience, I confronted her, insisting that we needed to address our problems either by attending therapy together or by being honest about what was truly wrong. She attempted to gaslight me, claiming I was being insensitive and dismissing my concerns, but I wasn't willing to let it go. I decided to uncover the truth and began snooping through her phone, although most of her messages and emails had been deleted. I couldn't recall exactly how I stumbled upon the evidence, but one day, she mentioned going out shopping with friends. I followed her car and discovered that she was cheating with a young college student. I went to his house, somewhat forcefully, and found Lisa in compromising situations. I was furious and confronted them, but Lisa intervened, pleading for me to leave and claiming it wasn't the young man's fault, that he was just one of the men she was seeing. This revelation was shocking, especially since the man seemed unaware of Lisa's marital status or that she had children. Upon returning home, I took several actions that any betrayed husband might consider. I contacted her parents to expose her infidelity in front of everyone, insisted on a divorce, and even hired a lawyer to discuss our case. As the situation unfolded, my lawyer explained that there was little to gain from the divorce, especially considering our young children, who still needed their mother's presence. I could potentially obtain joint custody, but that would leave me at Lisa's mercy regarding visitation and the terms of our separation. Additionally, since we lived in a no-fault divorce state, there was no avenue for moral policing against her actions. I would still be responsible for alimony and child support, which were unavoidable, meaning I would shoulder all the financial responsibilities as a father while being dependent on Lisa for time with my children. Lisa was also opposed to the idea of divorce. Instead, she proposed that we open our marriage, suggesting that we could return to each other whenever we felt like it. I knew I never wanted to reconcile with her, but divorce was financially out of the question at that time. The only feasible option was to separate and live as housemates while co-parenting our children. Although she labeled it an open marriage or whatever term she preferred, I saw it as a dead-end plan, and we remained separated for the past 10 years. During this period, Lisa had numerous partners, though she claimed none were serious. I believe she had at least 3 partners who were more than just physical, as they came to our home, went hiking, and even vacationed with her. It wasn't easy witnessing her becoming pregnant multiple times, first through her cheating, and then having various men in our bedroom. Our duplex house had a guest bedroom upstairs, and the stairs leading to it provided access through the back door. We had purchased the house from an Asian couple who had originally built it to accommodate their grown-up son with privacy. Unfortunately, their son moved out, and the couple sold the house to us as it was too large for them. The main entrance opened into a living room with a spacious closed kitchen and dining area, a master bedroom, and a storage room that we converted into our children's room. The upstairs guest room was the same size as the master bedroom, and the remaining space featured a large library-like area designed for reading and hosting parties. This space led to a small terrace at the top of the house. Since I was moved upstairs, I could observe most of what was happening downstairs. Sometimes, I wished I could turn a blind eye, but for the sake of my children, I remained vigilant. Initially, I attempted to date again, but quickly felt empty and unfulfilled, so I stopped. Instead, I focused on more meaningful pursuits. I joined a badminton club to improve my athletic physique and rekindled my love for sports, which I had enjoyed in college. On weekends, I participated in field games and joined a hiking club that organized solo hikes every 2 months. The idea was to hike alone without bringing friends, spouses, or anyone familiar, joining a group of strangers instead. It was incredibly enjoyable, and I continued this for 2 years before reducing it to twice a year. Over the last 10 years, I've had casual hookups, but never formed any emotional attachments or long-term relationships. With Kathy, however, things are different. I feel genuinely happy around her. She's the woman I believe I can give love another chance to. Unfortunately, the turmoil in my life seems to be catching up with me. The current situation remains unchanged. Kathy refuses to come to my place, and I'm worried she might distance herself from me, which I don't want to happen. It feels like I'm being forced to choose between Kathy and my children, and I'm struggling to make that decision. Update 1*. Hello everyone, I want to thank you all for your suggestions and comments. They've been invaluable, both the positive and the critical. I sought therapy, which has significantly helped me understand my priorities and what I truly want at this stage in my life. As many of you mentioned, my children are entering their teenage years, and in just a few years, they'll be living their own lives. It doesn't make sense to forego the chance at happiness with Kathy now. I had an open and honest conversation with Kathy about my feelings, expressing my desire to be with her and asking if she felt the same. She confirmed that she does, but expressed reluctance due to the complexities of my family's situation. Kathy isn't comfortable being around my legal wife, Lisa, but she's okay with the children being around me. I assured her that I could handle the situation. I'm planning to move out, allowing the children to decide where they want to live as they are mature enough to make the choice. They can also choose to alternate between living with their mother and me, which Kathy supported. My therapist recommended family counseling to help our children understand our marital status in an age-appropriate way. When I informed Lisa about the counseling, she reacted negatively, accusing me of being selfish and disrupting our children's lives by getting serious with Kathy. She insisted that I should prioritize my family over my own desires. In response, I confronted her, pointing out the hypocrisy in her moralizing when she was the one bringing other men into our home while our children were still very young. I told her to back off and proceeded to take the children to counseling, which they responded to positively. They appreciated that we were both supporting each other for their sake and acknowledged my right to pursue happiness. I informed Lisa that I would be filing for divorce, which shocked and distressed her. She wept, expressing disbelief that I would leave our family for another woman, despite her own history of infidelity. I stood my ground, emphasizing that I love Kathy and don't want her to be labeled as a mistress. I recognized that Lisa would go to great lengths to tarnish Kathy's reputation. I informed her that the divorce papers would be filed soon, and that I would be moving in with Kathy next month, after taking the children on a trip once their annual exams were completed. I anticipated a sense of relief once everything was settled. Update 2*. I want to share an additional update to clarify that Lisa is indeed a difficult person, as I mentioned in my previous update. During a recent vacation with my children, Lisa seized the opportunity to execute her malicious plans. She approached Kathy emotionally, pleading for her to back off and claiming that she was tearing our family apart, insisting that our children would suffer because of her actions. Lisa attempted to guilt-trip Kathy, but Kathy remained steadfast and composed, choosing to wait for my return. She had the hotel number where I was staying but chose not to contact me, which I greatly admire about her. Upon returning home and learning of Lisa's deceitful actions, I confronted her angrily, expressing that she should have addressed her behavior sooner. Her sense of entitlement had gone too far, and I was determined not to tolerate it any longer. I officially moved out of the house, and my children decided to live with me. However, our current residence lacks a spare room for them, so I'm in the process of finding a larger house to accommodate everyone. Until then, the children are staying at their mother's place. As I moved out, Lisa threw tantrums ranging from guilt-tripping and yelling to gaslighting and tearful pleas for another chance in our relationship. I reiterated that our relationship had effectively ended 10 years ago, and that we were merely housemates and co-parents at that point. I explained that I had moved on from loving her, and that she no longer held any place in my heart. My feelings were solely for Kathy, and I intended to spend the rest of my life with her. When the divorce papers reached Lisa, she tore them up, prompting my lawyer to send her a legal notice threatening to sue for damaging the documents. It wasn't until then that Lisa agreed to sign the papers, and the divorce proceedings are now underway. Since then, I haven't interacted with my ex-wife. I've gone to pick up my children twice, but haven't entered her house. For those who asked, my children are now 11 and 13 years old, mature enough to comprehend the divorce and separation. Update 3*. I'm thrilled to announce that my ex-wife is now officially divorced from me. The most significant development in this update is that the divorce has been finalized, and my children have moved in with me. They will visit their mother every 2 weeks or whenever they wish. The past month has been hectic as I've been busy renting a new house and moving our belongings. We hadn't informed Lisa about the children's move-in until after I secured the new residence, anticipating her reaction. My children and I were aware that Lisa would likely react strongly, so we decided to handle it legally rather than face potential confrontations. According to our divorce agreement, we must provide a 3-day notice if we wish to take our children for more than 2 days. I returned home and informed Lisa that the children wanted to live with me and that I would be collecting them in 3 days. As expected, she freaked out, but fortunately, she didn't resort to violence or property damage. Instead, she chose an emotional route, hugging the kids, apologizing profusely, and pleading with them not to abandon her. She tried her best to manipulate them emotionally to stay with her, which she succeeded in doing with the younger child. However, the older son remained firm in his decision to move in with me. When I went to pick him up, both boys were prepared with their belongings. I hugged them tightly and sent them off without questioning their actions, understanding that it was already a traumatic experience for them. Kathy and I are working together to make them feel comfortable in our new home by involving them in setting up their rooms according to their preferences. As the children were leaving, I anticipated one last attempt from Lisa to change my mind, but she had already given up. She simply sat there crying and sobbing, hugging the boys tightly, expressing remorse for her behavior, and telling them she loved them, assuring them they could always return to their mother if they wished. After saying goodbye to the children, Lisa asked if I had time for a coffee. Her request seemed genuine, so I agreed. Her tone was filled with remorse, and she apologized sincerely, admitting that she had been delusional in thinking I would never leave her when Kathy entered my life. She confessed that she didn't see Kathy as a threat and had mistaken her for a fleeting fling that would fade within a month. She admitted to taking me for granted because of the security I provided for her and our children. Despite everything she had done, including her narcissistic and mean behavior, she realized her faults too late. I could only smile and suppress my emotions, choosing to leave. She moved to embrace me, and we shared a hug, the first in 10 years. I couldn't fully process or express how I felt about it. Instead, I felt a sense of numbness. The past 6 to 7 months have been a life-altering phase for me. I recognize that I need time to process everything, but I am immensely grateful for all the support I've received. You all have been the best. I might provide further updates if anything new happens from here. Story 2*. My wife cheated on me with her own cousin, and I exposed their affair to the entire family, leading to our divorce. My wife and I had known each other our entire lives before we got married. Our relationship was the quintessential childhood romance, friends since we were young, falling in love, and eventually marrying. We shared our first kisses and were each other's first loves. Growing up as neighbors, we often played together, and I was familiar with her family just as she was with mine. Everyone would joke that we were destined to be together forever. After graduating from college, We got married and began planning our future. We decided to buy a house from my uncle in our hometown to stay close to our families. A few years into our marriage, we decided to start a family, and everything seemed perfect. We had twin children, and our life was idyllic. Out of the blue, one evening while watching a TV show, my wife asked me if I ever regretted not being with another woman. I immediately assured her that I didn't. I admitted that while there had been other women I was attracted to, the idea of being with them never crossed my mind because I loved her deeply and believed she was the only one for me. When I inquired why she brought this up, she said she had been thinking about it and was worried that I might become bored with her. She brushed off the conversation, and we continued watching our show. During my wife's teenage years, her aunt married a new man. This was significant because her aunt had previously gone through a bitter divorce and had been living with our family for some time. After marrying this new man, her aunt moved out. The man had 2 children around our age, introducing 2 new boys to our neighborhood. They were both quite rowdy. One of them, let's call him Paul, had a reputation as a problem child. Paul was known for throwing wild parties, getting into trouble, and having numerous casual relationships. Despite his antics, he was always fun to be around, the life of any party. As he grew older, Paul had calmed down significantly, secured a good job, and seemed to be on a stable path. His only ongoing issue was his inability to maintain long-term relationships. They often ended before becoming serious, leaving Paul quite upset each time. Paul was dating a girl he genuinely liked, but she ended up breaking up with him, leaving him hurt and distraught. In his vulnerable state, Paul reached out to both me and my wife for support. My wife, being the sensitive and caring person she was, decided to visit his house to cook him dinner and listen to him. I chose not to join her, not wanting to overwhelm him further. At the time, I never suspected that anything inappropriate was happening between them. However, later that night, my wife returned home and seemed unusually evasive when I asked her about her visit. She was reluctant to share what Paul had discussed with her, which I found suspicious, but I never thought she was being unfaithful. In hindsight, many of her actions following that night indicated she felt guilty. She became excessively generous, cooking my favorite meals, surprising me with small gifts, and showering me with compliments. Her behavior was unusually over the top, almost childlike, as if she was trying to compensate for something, much like a child who has broken something and is attempting to make amends. About a week after her visit to Paul, she returned again, saying she wanted to bring him some food to ensure he was eating healthily. I offered to accompany her to check on him, but she insisted it would be better if she went alone, attributing it to his emotional state. I stayed back to put the kids to bed while she visited Paul. She returned a few hours later, claiming they had a lengthy conversation about everything, but she still didn't provide any details about what he had said. Over the next few weeks, my wife started visiting Paul more frequently on her own. Paul, who had dated many women and had numerous breakups, was not accustomed to such emotional support, especially from someone like my wife. The more time my wife spent with him, the more it didn't make sense. One evening, I came home and noticed that something was different. I asked her about her recent interactions with Paul, still not suspecting anything sexual, but sensing that something was off. She maintained her story about Paul being emotionally fragile after his breakup. I suggested that maybe I could talk to him to offer some advice, but she dismissed the idea, believing it wouldn't be helpful. The following day, during my lunch break at work, I decided to stop by Paul's house to check on him. At that time, my wife wasn't working. She was a stay-at-home mom with the kids at school, giving her the entire day to do as she pleased. When I arrived, I saw her car in the driveway, but she hadn't mentioned any plans to visit Paul that afternoon, which was unusual. As I approached the door to ring the bell and see what was happening, I heard noises from inside, sounds that unmistakably indicated they were having sex. My wife was being pressed against the door, and I stood there frozen, unable to believe what I was witnessing. Without thinking, I called out to her, and she answered her phone, only to reject my call. I heard muffled conversations as Paul joked about having something that could make her forget about another woman. They resumed kissing and moved to another part of the house, leaving me standing outside for several minutes, contemplating my next move. I had just caught my wife having sex with Paul, who was her cousin, not related by blood, but still considered family. It took me a few moments to process the situation, but I knew immediately that our entire relationship was over. Years of friendship and love were being destroyed in that moment. Determined to have evidence before taking action, I remembered that Paul had a spare key hidden under a rock near his house. I retrieved it and let myself in, hearing noises from the bedroom. The door was wide open, and I took out my phone to quickly record a video of both of them. After about 30 seconds, I knocked on the door, and they both turned around, attempting to cover themselves and explain the situation. The most absurd part was my wife's attempt to justify her actions by saying she was only sleeping with Paul to help him get over another woman, as if that made it acceptable. I was utterly shocked and immediately left to handle the situation. I canceled the rest of my workday, sat in my car, and began searching online for a competent divorce attorney. I contacted one and scheduled a meeting. Meanwhile, I went home to pack a bag to stay at my parents' house while everything was being sorted out. I took the kids from school and brought them along, informing my wife via text that I had them safely and needed some time away from her. The next time I saw her, I served her with divorce papers. However, that wasn't sufficient for me. Her betrayal went too deep, involving her own cousin, effectively destroying our family. I wanted to retaliate, but I realized that many wouldn't understand or support their relationship again, given that he wasn't a blood relative but still family. I decided to make a heartfelt Facebook post explaining that after years of being together, my wife and I were divorcing. I revealed the affair with minimal details, and many family members commented, condemning her actions and expressing their sympathy for what I was going through. Later that day, my wife and Paul both reached out, asking me to remove the post because they were receiving hateful messages from family and friends. I told them that I didn't need to take it down and had no intention of doing so. As a result, both my wife and her cousin were ostracized from all our family functions. They lost many friends, and virtually everyone in our small community was ashamed of them for what they had done. Word spread quickly in our town, making it difficult for Paul to find new girlfriends, and both he and my wife were humiliated by the post. We are now divorced, and I was awarded the house and all our shared assets because I had purchased them initially. She hasn't received any spousal support from me, and until she secures employment, I have primary custody of our children.